What I do, my earliest remembrance of Beth Jacob is Rabbi Simon. And he was quite, I remember he was quite authoritative. I'm using a nice word here. Just a real stern guy. And when he left and Eugene came, it was a shock. It was a culture shock because I'd only known this kind of rabbi, this sort of, like it's almost like the priesthood kind of thing. I've got the connection. I think I was 15 when he came, and he, we became fast friends. I don't know why, but he was like such a cool guy. He was young. He was in his late 20s, and I got to know him and the boys, and I got to know Anita, and became friends. He became like a confidant for me because I lost my father when I was 13 years old, and he was like my go-to guy, and he was very compassionate, very understanding, and he was a major influence in my life. Throughout my life, he has been the seminal person for me in my relationships. He married me and my wife. I'm involved in mystical Judaism called Kabbalah. It was on his recommendation that I actually I started to study Kabbalah, because I'd gone to New York to talk to him about it, because if he had said, be careful, don't do it, I wouldn't have done it. His response to me was phenomenal, and that's what got me involved in Kabbalah. And I was with him during his death passage, and I'm very friendly with Anita today. I just came back from Israel 2 weeks ago and spent 3 days with Anita.
Do you know that she sent Michael Sue a letter about that she was forwarding to Beth Jacob Synagogue about her memories of their time in Hamilton?
I asked her to do it.
You did? It was a beautiful letter. Did you see it?
No, but I asked her to do it, and she was very touched by the whole idea, by the way. So it was a seminal moment in their lives too. You know, like I don't know if you know his background, but he was, from what I understand, he was a prodigy at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. When I mean prodigy, I mean like he was like a wunderkind there. He studied with Heschel, like the biggest people you could imagine, and what I had understood was he was very arrogant, because he was a very, very smart young kid, very prodigious. And so they wanted to give him a pulpit. So they shoved him off to Hamilton, sort of knock him down a few pegs, and it was a great experience for him. We later talked about it, like he learned a whole bunch of different things about the politics of synagogues, and you know, and it was a very interesting experience for him. And they loved Hamilton. So,
tell me, can you talk to me about some of the activities that he organized for the teens in those days? Well,
I must tell you that I wasn't involved in that, and I'll tell you why. Because at my life at that time, I was going through a very tough time after my dad had passed away, and I was sort of a juvenile delinquent kind of guy. I didn't really know my place, where I was going. So he was more of a lifesaver for me than he was, let's go on a trip to Israel together. For example, like I was kicked out of my house when I was 16 years old, and he took charge of me. He got me to Israel. He got me through his family, which is Anita's sister. They got me on a kibbutz. They took absolute care of me. He saved my life. And it wasn't like, well, everyone else around the kind of, and I'm glad for everybody, because I know there were profound trips that he had taken to Israel, but my experience with him was not pleasant in that way. It was life-saving.
Okay, now that you're saying that, I think I knew that. I'd heard that. So then, from your intimate relationship with Gene and Anita, what else can you tell me about how the experience was for them being in Hamilton, what those years meant to them?
Well, it was you know, they just had young kids at the time, and so you know, that's where the kids basically grew up. And you know, what they say, the child's their personality is finished by 3 or 4 years old, or 5 or something like that. They're a very important, like I said, they're as a seminal moment for all of them, for their marriage, for their kids, their family, for the learning, and I mean, it was a huge learning curve for Gene when he came to Hamilton, because he'd never had a pulpit before. So.
And isn't it true that Hamilton ended up being his only pulpit?
I think that's correct. I think it is true, and I think that the last thing, I think that's correct. And I think that he moved to Israel, and I think he became the head of the psychology department, the head of, I think, a psychology department at Haifa. Yeah. In fact, something interesting, you may not use this, but about Gene. Susan Feldman knows this because she was involved with me. Eugene had an idea, and he said, he talked to us about it. He said that he believes that he always believed that the greatness of the Jewish people is within his genius. That was what he said. That was his idea. The fact that the most Nobel Prizes are won by Jews, and I mean, but there's something about the genius of Jewish people. He created a program. This is a phenomenal thing I'm saying to you. I mean, to me. He created a program called the Friends of Eugene Weiner. We called it the FEW, right? F-E-W. And he created a program in the University of Haifa where he took all the idiot savants, people who didn't know how to, ask for money, the social, kiss tuchus, didn't know any of that stuff. They're just these incredible genius people, men and women. Put them in a laboratory within the University of Haifa. We went and raised money for it. And he got them any equipment they wanted to have. Test tubes, from technology, early computer, whatever it was. It was from that Israel's next iteration of being a world leader in technology came from that. That was the source of it. We're talking about in the 70s, 80s. I don't know if there were many computers at that time, but that was a major source of it. He was an extraordinary guy. The other thing I remember with Gene was, there's an organization. I used to go to Israel all the time and visit him, and because we're so close, and we used to go on trips together. And we went to, one of his friends was an archaeologist who discovered a very famous Byzantine tile floor, the size of this in the Galilee. And I went there, and it was a phenomenal experience. But I went to, Gene had started a movement called Zahavi. And Zahavi was an organization of Sephardic Jews. And in those days, back in the 80s and I think late 80s and early 90s, the Sephardic Jews were basically screwed in Israel. They had no, they were looked on as sort of second-class Jews, and there's all kinds of issues around that stuff. They were poor. Most of them were poor as compared to the Ashkenazis. Gene created a co-op. He created a co-op, and I went to a picnic with him in Tel Aviv, where it was like being with Martin Luther King. He came in, and there were 30,000 people partnered to let him go through. It's amazing. It was like one of those great life experiences of inspiration. It's amazing.
So, the fact that he participated in the Civil Rights March with Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama, during his time at Beth Jacob, that was so much a part of him that he continued to do these visionary things throughout his life?
Well, I'm telling you, he created the first co-op in Israel. He saved these people's. They had a buying co-op. Like I mean, he was so respected. It was unbelievable. Like I knew him as Gene Weiner, and like he's my friend and thing. But to see the effect that he had on other people was extraordinary.
Tell me more about when you said he was a prodigy and that he was arrogant and that they wanted to knock him down a notch, so they sent him to Hamilton. Where'd you get all that information?
Well, I heard that. I don't know where I heard. I don't know whether he told me or Anita told me or came in passing as we started talking about, because we became lifelong intimate friends. He was my best friend. Like he was my closest, the dearest friend. So whether it was brought up, that's a story that I had heard, because there's no reason why anybody with that kind of, he was like really seriously smart. He was like really smart, and and had amazing mentors and teachers. Like when you talk about that Abraham Heschel was one of his teachers. I mean like one of his close students. He was one of his close students. So I mean, kind of the story made sense to me, because why would they send him to Hamilton? I mean, Hamilton's love Hamilton and all that stuff, but
even though it's hard to believe he was only in Hamilton for 3 years because he had such an incredible impact.